Okay, so today we're going to look at the JCB 6-ton cabbed dumper. This is not their newest range. They've got some new site-safe ranges they've released recently, but this is one of their, as they call it, site-safe cabbed 6-ton swivel dumper. And there's a few things I've been meaning to have a look at one of these for a while. They've got the first machine that really looks like the cab is actually meant to be mounted to the dumper rather than something that they've kind of bodged on a standard dumper afterwards. I think JCB have done a very good job with that, with the looks and how it kind of sits. So quite interested to see what a cab dumper's like. Haven't driven one before. This week we've had this machine on hire for 3 weeks now, and I'll run you through some of the points that we like, obviously some of the things that we think could be improved, and generally what it's been like to live with for 3 weeks. Right, so we'll start at the front of the cab. We'll walk around the outside of the machine first and we'll come back to inside later. I think they've done a really good job here of creating some decent access finally. You've got two very, very good steps. They don't get bunged up with mud because they've got nice big holes in, and you've got plenty of grab handles to get on and off the machine as well. So props to JCB here. I think they've done a good job. You can keep 3 points of contact easily, starting here, work your way up. Works for me. I think they've done, as I say, a very good job. One thing, the step here, the only thing it does do is interfere with the greasing nipple on the back of the steering ram, which is a bit frustrating. You have to park it sort of hard turn to the right to be able to get a grease gun to that. But, you know, otherwise access is very good. Moving on around the side, they've tried to keep everything from ground level again for, you know, checks and fueling up and things, which it's good. It's finally someone sort of redesigning the site dumper that had probably been around for 30 years. Fuel is in this little flap here. You can get a nozzle into it. You won't get a jerry can, but I'm not worried about that because on a machine this size, you're filling up from a Bowser. I think this has a 60-litre tank, and that seems to last it for most of our work for sort of 2-3 days. I mean, some of the work we've been doing here over a week. Depends obviously how much you use the dumper. But if you're working hard every day, you'll go through a tank every couple of days, I would expect, which I don't think is bad fuel consumption. You can also then open the bonnet from this little lever pull on the side, which then gives you pretty good access. And this is again, you know, revolutionary in terms of dumpers, where you normally have to lift the seat up. You can get to the engine, or at least some of it. Intercooler and rad is on the back. It's really easy to blow out. You've got your screen wash here, and then you can access some bits from the engine from a much easier point of view. Air filter. You've got your oil dipstick down in the corner here, which is really easy to get to. Filters, check your fuel bowl. It makes sense to me. Very straightforward. They've even thought about the fact that you can't reach up there and get it. You can pull on this strap to close it. So again, props to JCB. They're coming up with some good ideas. Hydraulic filter, or hydraulics all around the side here, and you can top your hydraulic tank up there, work on it. This engine is a JCB, the 444 engine, so it's a 4.4 litre JCB engine, turbocharged. It does have a DPF, but there's no AdBlue, so at least you're not having to worry about any of that side of it. It will meet the stage 5 emissions, which this one is I think it's a 2019 machine, so it doesn't have that, but the latest ones do. So there's not a huge amount to really go wrong with them. The DPF will automatically regen as you go along. It doesn't sort of interfere or require you to do anything different. They've kind of got that set up a bit like your car or your van does. So these are all, again, you know, makes it nice and easy and simple to use. I think it kicks out 74 horsepower, which is pretty competitive in the dumper market. The Thwaites is running a very similar kind of setup. This engine does have a bit more torque though, I think about 50 more torques, which all helps with a dumper, especially when you're running it through a power shuttle and you know, in deep mud. You do lose traction with these, well, not traction, but power with these torque converters. The more torque you have, the more it can convert. So that's the good news there. Inside, for access, you can lift this whole pod on the inside you can lift up as well. You just have to fold the seat forward and this whole pod will lift up, and you can get again to both sides then of the engine, and there isn't a lot that I don't think you can get to pretty reasonably. The battery is stored under the floor. The floor plate comes up with nice easy bolts to get to the top of the transmission. Again, it runs the JCB power shift transmission, which has been proven for decades now in various machines, and is a very, very reliable box. JCB axles, again, been proven for a long time. It's got some good decent components underneath, so shouldn't get really too many problems with that. And JCB have been supplying, remember, axles and transmissions, etc., to Terex, for example, for a good few years now as well. So there actually isn't much underneath this dumper that's new particularly. They've just packaged it in a much better way, I think, than other manufacturers. Moving on round the front, there's a couple of things they've done to try and improve visibility, because that's the problem really with site dumpers, is that people load them up massively high, you can't see where you're going. So they've tried to improve this skip angle, and you can see it's at a bit of an off angle to help your forward visibility. The second thing they've done is they've added a forward facing camera. Now you'd think mostly cameras point to the back because it's in the rear you can't see very much. Well, here really it's the front, because if you're stood here and you've got a heap in the skip, it's very, very difficult to see someone, and people have been run over. So we've got a camera mounted down here. It's a pretty low quality unit, and I'll show you the screen when we do the inside. I think that's something they could improve, but I like the idea, because at least you have some idea of what's in front of you, and as I say, anything we can do to try and improve safety really with these machines is all part of it. Lights are fairly well out of the way, although they've got this sort of hole in the front here, and as you can see it collects mud, so I'm not really sure how that, it's not ideal. Wherever you put lights is not great. I know Thwaites like to mount them down in the front of the skip here, and the valance, they get broken there or covered in concrete. It's just one of those things. Wherever we put the lights is not going to be great, but they are at least in pretty sturdy metal boxes, and cheap enough to replace if you do break one off. The last thing really on the outside that I've mentioned is the shape of the skip, and I don't think there's a perfect shape. No one has really nailed it yet, with a swivel particularly. But this one, it's got a pretty flat sort of front face, and there's no lip on the outside, so it's pretty good for tipping and not retaining too much material, particularly sticky wet stuff. We've got some of that here, but it does have, and when you're using it like a gravel skip, you're digging out of it, it's got this edge here that kind of funnels the skip in a bit, and for me I just find them frustrating, because you're trying to dig in with a grading bucket, and anything sort of wider than like a 600 bucket, and you can't get the last 6 inches out of the dumper because the bucket rides up on these edges. Yeah, that's pretty much the outside. Generally, I think they've done a pretty good job. We'll go through the cab. Right, so we've come on to the inside of the cab, and it's a real luxury to have cabs on dumpers, and it's something that I think is a massive improvement, and really will, I think, pioneer the way that we use dumpers and change having people constantly getting on and off of machines where they then become a pedestrian while they're being loaded. If you're a pedestrian, you can get hit, you can get run over by other machines. I think it's a massive step in the right direction for the industry to have guys sat comfortably within machines. It's much safer. I think you've got a much more comfortable environment to be in, because let's face it, who wants to be operating a dumper in the pouring rain? It's not particularly fun, and to be honest, we shouldn't be putting guys through it these days. So this is the JCB cab. They call it their site safe cab, and they've tested it to withstand the hit from a 20-ton excavator, which is a good video on YouTube if you want to find that one. They literally slew into the side of it with a X220, and it obviously puts a fair dent in it, but it survives. And you've got to think, as an operator of this machine, it wouldn't kill you, and that's a full bucket, slamming into the side. So somebody getting a little bit excited at the front, if they knock the side of the cab, again, it's going to withstand some light knocks and bumps pretty well. The front screen they've installed, they call like a hammer glass screen, so that should stop if any debris comes over the top and it hits the screen. Again, that shouldn't crack, or if it does, it won't come through the screen at you. The rest of the cab is all toughened glass, but there's obviously a lot less risk from the sides. Both doors open up and fold back, so in the summer you can run it as a traditional kind of open, let the wind through kind of design, and in the winter you've got the option to close both doors and stay nicely nestled inside with your heater, which is a nice touch. Front and rear wipers, which is good for visibility. You've got, as I say, the heater, which only points at the front screen, so in the winter I'd have thought, we haven't had any real cold days here where it's been misted up or dewed up from the morning when we've got to it, but I'd have thought it would take a while to really warm it up if you've only got the front screen that you can defrost. So I do wonder whether this heated console, which is down in front, wouldn't be better off up in the cab here in the top, because then you can kind of point it in sort of several directions at some of the glass. But it's a minor detail, and any heater is an improvement on standard. Otherwise, very, very similar to a standard dumper. You've got your clutch, which is obviously just a disengagement pedal for the power shuttle, brake and accelerator, 4 speeds on the floor, and forward and reverse on the stick. All works very well. When you go to move off in this machine, there's a few things that you have to do to make it move, and they've done that, they've designed that deliberately to basically ensure that there's somebody operating from the seat, and that everyone around you knows that you're actually intending to move, because again, plenty of people have walked in front of machines just as they're about to move off and been hit that way. So you have to, it won't let you, if you try, and I'd have tried this, I do the testing so you don't have to, you can't just have the seatbelt plugged in to get the green beacon flashing, keep the sight agent happy, and then jump in and jump out of it. It won't let you do that. You have to plug the seatbelt in every time you get and start the machine. So if you start the machine with the seatbelt in, it will let you do that, but it will not let you move. You have to unplug the seatbelt, obviously put it on, plug it back in. Now, sounds like a real hassle, but the reality is you're in this machine for longer than just 10 seconds, 20, a minute moving it around the job. So it's not really a problem. You're in the machine, you can just sit in it, put your seatbelt on, and off you go. And then it'll, just work every time. Every time you want to move, drop the handbrake, head off, and she'll go. The other thing it does is it does a little double beep, which the only thing I would say on that is it's exactly the same sort of beep that someone would make from a digger if they wanted to get your attention. So when we first had it, every time it moved, you were looking around going, who wants me? But I get it now, and we're now used to it. And when it moves forward, it goes beep beep, and you can move on. So at least it lets someone who would potentially be in front of the machine know that you're literally about to move. When you go in reverse, it's got a white noise indicator. It doesn't beep. It just makes the usual sort of buzzing noise. So yeah, not a bad little place to spend a shift. A couple of things that I like, and a couple of things I think they could improve on. I like the fact that you've got a speedo down here, and you've got a fuel gauge, nice and easy to see, and gone are the days of you having to lift the engine cover to check the bloody fuel all the time in a machine like this. It's just not necessary anymore. We've got a fuel gauge, we've got a speedo, very nice. It even records the kilometres you've done, so you can tell how many miles you've been driving around the site. Standard handbrake and swivel levers down here, but what it's missing is, we've got a cab now, so I'm looking for these extra features. We've got no cup holder, and we haven't really got anywhere to put anything. Now, you might argue that a site dumper shouldn't become a glorified drying room, and we don't want boys hanging all their coats, wet coats and crap in the dumper, but we do use these machines traditionally as mobile wheelbarrows that we scoop out of the skip. That is often their main use. And there's nowhere to put a bottle of water or anything. And if you're in this, for 4 or 5 hours, between breaks, I don't see why you couldn't have that, to be honest. I'm not looking for, anything particularly fancy. I don't need Netflix in the cab, but what I do want is just somewhere to put some stuff. Where do my gloves go? You know, I take my gloves off, we've stuffed them in this little hole here. I don't really think it's designed for that. It's just kind of where we've ended up putting them. There is a coat hook on each side, so you could hang your hard hat on there and put a coat in it, but it just lacks you know, there's a lot of room here for a bit of storage space, and it would be nice to you know, be able to put, let's say, a couple of drinks or something, anything like that while you're operating it. So that's my usual traditional bang on about the cup holder thing. I'll stop that. Up in the roof, you can get a radio, which this one isn't fitted with, but it's all possible up in the roof. That'd be a nice touch. You've got quite a handy little sun visor, which comes down here, folds away up in the roof nicely. And then we've had this mirror, this curved mirror on the front here, has been really useful, and probably one of the most used mirrors that I've used since driving it. Gives really good view from behind you in pretty much all directions, so I do like that, and it'd be nice to see that on more machines. I'll show you the front facing camera screen, because that's something again that I think could just be a little bit better quality. Fire it up, the old buzzer will come on obviously. So that's what you get. Why is it beeping at me? Shush. So the front facing camera, this is what you get, and I mean, you can see it now on a day at the moment, but when the sun is in front of you, it's very, very difficult to see anything because the glare from on the camera, you know, you can't see a lot. I just think, you know, technology is pretty cheap now, really, and we could do with a slightly better quality screen to make this feature, which I like. I think it's a good feature. I just think it would be a little bit more useful if the quality was better. Interestingly enough, there is an option to put a 360 camera on this, or at least side and rear. I don't think it's one of those overhead ones, but that is an optional extra on these machines, as is aircon, which would be another nice thing to see in the summer. This one doesn't have aircon. What it has is these little struts that fit on the door, and the idea is that you're meant to be able to hook the door open so that it's just slightly ajar, and that works as a theory. You're driving along, you get a bit of ventilation. It does kind of work, but there's two problems with that. One is that that's where you're being loaded in front of you, and if the wind's blowing this way, what happens is all the dust from what you're being loaded with comes firing in the cab at you, which isn't ideal. And of course there's nowhere for it to vent out, so you just get choked up with dust. And the second thing is that the metal catch itself just sort of rests against the window, which is really crap and makes a horrible kind of metal against glass noise. So I'm pretty sure that could be improved. My theory is we have a window in the back that we can open up for ventilation, because that's away from where the dust is in the skip. Now, okay, you know, there's going to be dust, I guess, generated as you drive around site, but I don't know, either a window at the side or something that's away from, there's dust here, there's dust there. I just think we could improve the ventilation a little bit without having to use the you know, the heater, because naturally the air does get hot through a heater even when it's on cold, as we know. So that's really the inside of the cab. Just need to summarise up. So in summary, with the JCB 6T-1, my thoughts are, I think they've done a very good job on their first real go at creating their own range of site dumpers, and the cab is a massive improvement, I think, for the industry generally on dumpers, and as I say, the way that we will go on to use them on site. And the JCB dumper, really, it's a pretty good all-round package, because you gain their live link system, which if you've got other machines as well, will all link in with your telematics, tell you pretty much everything, what the status of the DPF is, through to when it needs a service and how many hours it's done, and of course the important tracking as to where it is and how it's being driven on site. Really, really good feature, and no one else runs that kind of telematics on a site dumper. It's also very competitive in its capacity, has a skip capacity of 3,149 litres. That's 1 litre difference from the Thwaites, and for the way that skip's profiled, I think they've been very clever in gaining that. That's the heat capacity, by the way, because let's face it, who strucks? There's no struck loads, is there? We like to heat things up. We've got a job to do and we need to move it. So I think they've done a good job, really, with keeping the capacity whilst improving visibility. Great features inside the cab. The front camera is a very, very good idea and good concept, despite the fact that I think it could always be improved. Everything can be improved. And yeah, I think it's got ground clearance just over 300 mil, so that's not bad. Again, competitive, and a turning radius of 5.7 meters, which is a good 300 mil better than the Thwaites, for example. Of course, there's other dumpers that you could look at with the cabs. I don't personally think that Thwaites have done a great job with putting a cab on their machines, but I have yet to see one and use one in the flesh, so I'll reserve judgment until I've used one. But Mecalec are another good competitor for this, with their range of 6 and 9 ton dumpers that have been specifically designed to have a cab, and I really like their idea of coming up the back of the mudflat for access. I think that's a pretty decent, different way of doing things. So I look forward to what the dumper industry has to bring us over the next few years, because they are finally revolutionising the traditional design that's been around for donkey's years and giving us operators something a bit better to use. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the JCB.